The Prime Minister will be hoping to seal the terms of the nation's divorce from Brussels when she marches on the city this afternoon to meet with Eurocratinchief JeanClaude Juncker. If secured, the forging of the initial Brexit deal will be used as a foundation for trade and treaty talks with the bloc as the UK breaks free from the yoke of the European Union and out into the wider world. Eurocrats have warned Mrs May that today is the day to agree terms between European and UK officials ahead of an EU summit on December 14, with draft papers for the conference due in just 8 days. It follows months of stalling from the bloc's chief negotiator Michel Barnier over citizens' rights, the Irish border and the proposed multi-billion-pound divorce bill, but with Brussels insiders confirming negotiators are 90% of the way towards an agreement, and Irish officials adding there are intensive contacts back and forth between London and Dublin. The Prime Minister is closer to guiding the nation towards freedom from the 27-nation superstate than ever before. See below for the latest updates. Mrs May is facing one of the toughest tests yet in Britain's exit from the EU. 4:05 p.m. Theresa May's statement in both Mrs May and Mr Juncker remained tight-lipped on the progress of Brexit talks, delivering very similar statements as they admitted no deal will be concluded today. The Prime Minister, who didn't wait around for any questions from reporters, said, as President Juncker has said, "We have had a constructive meeting today. Both sides have been working hard in good faith. We've been negotiating hard, and a lot of progress has been made. On many of the issues there is a common understanding. And it is clear, crucially, that we want to move forward together, but on a couple of issues some differences do remain which require further negotiation and consultation, and those will continue, but we will reconvene before the end of the week and I am also confident that we will conclude this positively." 3:55 p.m. Jean-Claude Juncker says no deal will be reached today after hours of discussions. Juncker and May are finally addressing the press. He has said that no deal will be agreed today and that there are only 2 or 3 issues which are still being deliberated. He hailed the Prime Minister's defense of the UK's interests, quipping, "I have to say, she's a tough negotiator, not an easy one." Mrs May confirmed talks are ongoing and she expects to return to Brussels later this week to thrash out a deal. Both May and Juncker said they are confident of striking a deal before the EU summit later this month. 3:40 p.m. Open Britain director calls for UK to remain in single market and customs union. This won't come as a shock to many, but the director of pro-campaign group Open Britain has said Brexit must not compromise the integrity of Britain and believes the only way to satisfy the relevant parties is to stay in the single market and customs union. James McCrory said, "One of the few things that generates agreement on Brexit is that it must not be allowed in any way to compromise the integrity of our United Kingdom." The DUP say they will not accept regulatory divergence from the rest of the UK, while Nicola Sturgeon and Sadiq Khan are asking for special deals for Scotland and London, and no one is any the wiser as to where the government stands. There is a solution that would solve all of these problems for the government, which is to keep the whole of the UK in the single market and the customs union. Reuters. Theresa May and Juncker leave the stage after conceding no Brexit deal will be agreed today. 3:30 p.m. Wales joins the rebellion after Sadiq Khan called for a separate Brexit deal for London and Nicola Sturgeon made similar demands for Scotland. News that Northern Ireland may be offered a separate Brexit deal has prompted Wales to call for their own bespoke deal. Welsh First Minister Carwyn Jones and Plaid Cymru leader Leanne Wood have both tweeted to urge Theresa May to remember Wales' interests. Mr Jones tweeted, "We cannot allow different parts of the UK to be more favourably treated than others. If one part of the UK is granted continued participation in the single market customs union, then we expect to be made the same offer." Ms Wood said a hard border at Holyhead would be a disaster for the Welsh economy. UK Govt is ignoring the Welsh national interest. Any special deal must be available to Wales and Scotland too. Welsh government must fight for this. It should be remembered that Wales voted 52.5% in favour of leaving the European Union in last year's referendum, while London, Northern Ireland and Scotland all backed Remain. 3:20 p.m. May calls Foster. Minutes after her speech, Theresa May is believed to have called Arlene Foster within minutes of the end of the DUP leader's Brexit speech, in which she said her party will not accept any regulatory divergence between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK. The failure of the Prime Minister's election gamble all means. Ultimately, Mrs May needs the DUP's support to have any hope of pushing Brexit legislation through Parliament. Sky's Ireland correspondent, David Blevins, tweeted the Prime Minister spoke to Arlene Foster by telephone within minutes of the DUP leader's statement. If anyone thinks the CS agreement is not an issue, think again. Brexit, 3:05 p.m. DUP's Nigel Dodds reveals Arlene Foster's position amid ongoing Irish border speculation. The DUP's deputy leader Nigel Dodds has taken to Twitter to reveal Arlene Foster's statement. She accused the Irish government of trying to undermine the Good Friday Agreement, and would not accept any regulatory divergence between Northern Ireland and the rest of the UK. TWITTERDUP leader Arlene Foster's statement in 2:30 p.m. Taoiseach expected to comment shortly. The Irish PM Leo Varadkar is expected to speak shortly following a delay to his previously scheduled statement. He is expected to confirm Northern Ireland will continue to have free market and customs union access to avoid the creation of a hard border. However, it has been claimed his statement has been put on hold while Theresa May talks with JeanClaude Juncker. After the lunch, Mrs May will meet with European Council President Donald Tusk before making a statement at approximately 4 p.m. While Kirby is taking over. Live reporting 2:20 p.m. Luxit, Sadiq Khan says London could strike an Ireland-style deal following similar calls from Scottish nationalist Nicola Sturgeon. Sadiq Khan has implied London could seek to remain in the customs union and single market. Taking to Twitter, he wrote, "Huge ramifications for London if Theresa May has conceded that it's possible for part of the UK to remain within the single market and customs union after Brexit. Londoners overwhelmingly voted to remain in the EU, and a similar deal here could protect tens of thousands of jobs." Sky News' Arlene Foster has said she will not stand for a shift in the Good Friday Agreement. 2 p.m. DUP outrage. Arlene Foster says they will not stand for undermining of Good Friday Agreement. Arlene Foster, leader of Theresa May's Commons allies the DUP, has spoken out over the Prime Minister's Ireland deal. She said, "We have been very clear. Northern Ireland must leave the EU on the same terms as the UK. The economy and constitution must not be compromised in any way." She added, "For our part, we do want to see a sensible Brexit." However, she accused Dublin of attempting to unilaterally change the Good Friday Agreement without her party's consent. She added, "We will not stand for that." 1:40 p.m. May's Ireland deal sparks nationalist argument from Nicola Sturgeon. Nicola Sturgeon has responded to the rumoured Ireland deal, saying her nation might also take advantage of access to the single market and customs union. It follows warnings from Nigel Farage that the deal could rouse nationalist sentiments in Scotland. The Scottish First Minister tweeted, "If one part of UK can retain regulatory alignment with EU and effectively stay in the single market, which is the right solution for Northern Ireland, there is surely no good practical reason why others can't." 1:30 p.m. UKIP leader, "That's a heck of a compromise." UKIP leader Henry Bolton has claimed the Ireland deal is a heck of a compromise. Taking to Twitter, he wrote, "So, the government is prepared to let Ireland be subject to the ECJ and European Commission, so still in the EU, that's a heck of a compromise." Meanwhile, a UKIP source has claimed the EU is playing the Irish and forcing Leo Varadkar to play hardball on behalf of the European Union. He told Express.co.uk the government should make it absolutely clear that from now on we are working on the assumption that there will be no deal, because it's transparent that the EU doesn't want one. 1:15 p.m. Nigel Farage blasts May's Brexit concessions. Nigel Farage has claimed the Ireland deal is a betrayal and will damage the integrity of the UK. He also implied the deal could rouse nationalist sentiments in Scotland. He said, "This is a bitter betrayal of 17.4 million people. It is a concession too far, for it will lead to endless problems in Scotland and it damages the integrity of the United Kingdom." Twitter. Donald Tusk's tweet appeared to confirm claims Northern Ireland will have single market access. 1:10 p.m. Theresa May will keep the future open. John Redwood tells Express.co.uk Brexiteer John Redwood has said today's talks will expand negotiations into discussions of the UK's future relationship with the EU, and not touch on wider issues of Brexit. He told Express.co.uk, "I am glad the government's policy is nothing is agreed until all is agreed, and that no deal is better than a bad deal. Today is about expanding talks to cover the future relationship. It is not going to be an agreement on the wider issues." 1 p.m. European Union could concede on ECJ jurisdiction. The European Union has reportedly conceded on the jurisdiction of the European Courts of Justice, with sources claiming instead a new system will be set up to process complaints from EU citizens in the UK. It comes amid reports the EU Brexit bill may have ballooned in size, costing hundreds of billions of euros over an unconfirmed time period. 12.50 Donald Tusk confirms bloc are moving closer to agreeing sufficient progress has been mad writing on Twitter. European Council President Donald Tusk has claimed the bloc are moving closer to agreeing sufficient progress has been made following concessions to the Irish government. He wrote, "Tell me why I like Mondays, encouraged after my phone call with Taoiseach Varadkar on progress on Brexit issue of Ireland, getting closer to sufficient progress at December." Meanwhile, Nigel Farage has warned the Irish deal looks like yet more concessions. 12:45 p.m. Theresa May meets with Juncker. The Prime Minister has met with JeanClaude Juncker ahead of their crunch talk today as more details of the UK's agreement with Ireland emerge. After speaking with the Eurocratinchief, Mrs May will head on to see Donald Tusk. Meanwhile, Irish Taoiseach Leo Varadkar has scheduled a meeting of all Irish party leaders at 1:30 p.m, before a statement on negotiations, which is due at 2:30 p.m. 12:30 p.m. Lamberts claims Brexit is not a negotiation and Johnson, Farage and Rees-Mogg need to come to terms with reality. Belgian MEP Philippe Lamberts has heaped scorn on Brexiteers, claiming the process is not a negotiation and hard Brexit backing politicians need to come to terms with reality. He said, "When you decide to leave the European Union, the process is not really a negotiation, it is basically finding the terms under which you can get out, but it is not really a negotiation. I would say it is mostly about enforcing commitments that have been taken." Asked about concessions, Mr. Lamberts said, "You call them concessions. I think the British government came to terms with reality and that's a good thing. I am sure that if you look at the situation from the perspective of Boris Johnson or Nigel Farage or Jacob Rees-Mogg, probably they will not be very happy, but then again they have a problem with reality, so bumping into it may be a bit painful, but that is again life." Monday, December 4, 2017, Theresa May is welcomed by European Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker at the EC headquarters in Brussels. 12:15 p.m. MEP confirms Northern Ireland could stay in customs union and single market. Belgian MEP Philippe Lamberts has revealed he has seen drafts of the UK's agreement with Ireland which would leave the North in both the customs union and the single market. Speaking on Sky News, he said the British government would commit to maintain the alignment where pertinent, of course. So single market and customs union legislation that might potentially create a border will remain while aligned, so there is not. As Sky News correspondent Faisal Islam noted, said the proposal would like remaining in the customs union and single market. The MEP agreed. He added it may like it, at least for Northern Ireland, but then again that's the only solution if you want to keep the Good Friday Agreement. Period. 12:05 p.m. Guy Verhofstadt accuses UK of disrespecting EU citizens following his meeting with Jean-Claude Juncker. Brexit-bashing federalist Guy Verhofstadt has accused the UK of disrespecting EU citizens. In a tweet, he said, "During my meeting with Mr. Juncker, I reiterated that EU citizens in the UK should not have to go through an unclear, costly and burdensome procedure. Their rights must be guaranteed. They came to the UK in good faith and must be treated with the respect they deserve." Twitter. Guy Verhofstadt accused the UK of disrespecting EU citizens following his meeting with Juncker. 11:50 a.m. Theresa May's office attempt to dampen expectations. We are looking to the 14th spokesman for the Prime Minister has attempted to limit expectations ahead of Mrs May's meeting with Jean-Claude Juncker. They claimed the UK wants progress as soon as possible, but is focused on the European Council summit on 14-15 December. However, as agreement with Ireland progresses, Mrs May could yet break the deadlock in her crunch meeting later today. 11:40 a.m. David Davis, moving talks on now is vital. Brexit Secretary David Davis has said moving on to trade talks is vital. Last, the EU summit on the 14th and 15th of December puts pressure on negotiators to set up a deal. David Davis said, "Well, I think it is an important day. The council can always make up its own mind on the 15th, but it is an important day. They will take a lot of guidance from the Commission, and everyone understands that the decision to move on to trade talks is vital. It is vital to everybody. It is of huge value to the 27 members and to ourselves." Asked if the PM was getting involved to fight his battles for him, the Brexit secretary laughed off the suggestion. He added, "The first negotiator in this process from the beginning has been the Prime Minister. She laid out the parameters at the Lancaster House speech. She reset the negotiations at the Florence speech. That's all done in conjunction, together." Getty JeanClaude Juncker met with Guy Verhofstadt in Brussels. 11:27 a.m. Draft of Ireland Agreement revealed Single Market and Customs Union on Ireland will continue. A draft text seen by Irish broadcaster Root News has claimed the UK will concede there will be continued regulatory alignment on the island with regards to the single market and the customs union in a major step forward in talks with Dublin. According to one version of the draft text, which will go towards forming a formal agreement between Dublin and London, the UK will also reaffirm its commitment to the Good Friday Agreement. The draft said, in the absence of agreed solutions, the UK will ensure that there continues to be no regulatory divergence from those rules of the internal market and customs union which, now or in the future, support North-South cooperation protection of the Good Friday Agreement. 11 a.m. Brexit campaigners demand no loss of British sovereignty. Brexiteers have called on the Prime Minister to stay true to the people's choice to leave and ensure the UK gets a clean break from Brussels without too many concessions. John Longworth, co-chair of campaign group Leave Means Leave, said this is an extremely important moment in the negotiations. The EU has been behaving in an obstructive manner since the British people voted to leave the EU, and talks cannot continue like this. The PM must make it crystal clear to the EU that either they agree to Britain's Brexit red lines or we will walk away from the talks and revert to WTO rules. Getty David Davis left Downing Street early to attend the crunch talks. 10:45 a.m. JeanClaude Juncker meets with Brexit team. Mr. Juncker was seen smiling broadly as he met with chief negotiator Michel Barnier and the European Parliament's Brexit representative Guy Verhofstadt. Ahead of his meeting with the Prime Minister, EU diplomats have reportedly seemed optimistic ahead of the meeting after months of doom-mongering, with some describing movement, traction and a lack of negativity in among the Brussels community. However, Mr. Verhofstadt's outlook was less positive than some of his fellow European parliamentarians. The Brexit-bashing Dutchman said that no deal has yet been reached on the terms of Brexit, claiming he sees the likelihood of a deal as the 30th of October. 50-50 deal or no deal. Caution from British Brexiteers as talks teeter on the brink. Talks have continued to teeter on the brink as the deadline for the EU's leadership summit looms in the background. Eurocrats have warned Mrs. May that today is the day to agree terms between European and UK officials ahead of an EU summit on December 14, with draft papers for the conference due in just 8 days. One senior EU diplomat told the Financial Times an agreement today was difficult but possible between people who are reasonable. However, British negotiators have plotted a more cautious path, saying they are working towards an agreement with a fair wind, but have not ruled out the EU scuppering progress yet again. Mrs. May's Brexit team are said to be prepared for more stalling from the bloc if EU officials decide not to grant Theresa May the ability to move on to the bulk of Brexit negotiations. Government sources have privately admitted no-deal scenario with the EU is increasingly likely. And if talks fail today, Mrs. May is under huge pressure from hardline Eurosceptic conservatives to quit the negotiations and prepare for World Trade Organization WTO rules, which experts believe will benefit the UK economy by £135 billion a year but harm the EU. The government unveiled a £3 billion Brexit war chest in the budget last month to get the UK ready for no deal. Getty Marie Mitchell O'Connor was one of the ministers called to the Irish cabinet meeting. 10 a.m. Leave Means Leave red lines demand May honours the referendum. Brexit campaign group Leave Means Leave, which is backed by more than 50 Tory parliamentarians, has set 7 red lines in the talks, making it clear Mrs. May cannot add to the growing list of compromises she has made in the face of intransigence from the EU. It also insists that not a penny should be paid to the EU in a divorce bill unless Britain gets a free trade deal with no tariffs in exchange. It notes that Mrs. May has shown immense patience and goodwill in the talks, making a generous offer in her Florence speech that the UK would still provide security for Europe and the UK would stump up the rest of its contributions to the current EU budget cycle worth an estimated £28 billion net. But the letter said that the EU has acted in a manner sadly unbecoming of an international body, making demands for vast sums of money, but refusing to set out what it will give in return. The signatories of the letter include former Tory cabinet ministers Lord Lawson, Owen Paterson and John Redwood MP, along with a rising star of the Conservative Party Jacob Rees-Mogg.